All right, welcome in to the Whistle Stop. He is the voice of the referees, Elliot. He is the voice of the player, Andrew, and I'm just here. So we've got this question in this week, and it's really not like a hey, I saw this, or hey, what about this thing that happened in my game? It's actually more just, I think, a common question people hear. I know I hear it when I'm at my kids' youth games or when I'm at our fields for Gotham is, man, why would somebody want to get into being a ref? I mean, a lot of people look at it as something that they would never want to do. So, Elliot, what is your background and why did you decide to become a ref?
I got into it quite late, relatively speaking. So I was 31 when I took the referees course. You can take it as young as 14 years old, and those are the kids when they take it at that age and they get fast tracked are the ones that you see ending up in MLS and the Premier League and FIFA and so on. So I got into it very late. It wasn't on my radar, but at that time I was going through a career change from law into education. And as I went into education, I also wanted to try and get more involved in football. So I did my referees course and my coaching course to try and turn those hobbies into something a little bit more than that could earn an income. So I was 31 years old. That was in 2010. But there were some clues before I was a referee, long before I was a referee. There was some clues that I would have the temperament and the mentality and also the tendency to enjoy it. So 3 examples would be I was about 18 and I did jury service in Crown Court, and I remember for those 2 weeks looking at the judge and the authority that he had in his courtroom and the respect that he was earning from both sides. And I remember thinking, not to do with refereeing, but just thought, wow, this man really commands respect and he's amazing at what he does and he's totally fair. So that left a lasting impression on me. As a player, I would play as an adult a lot of small-sided recreational football where we didn't have a referee. It was just 5v5 and we call our own fouls. And for the most part, we'd waste 5 minutes, 2 people arguing about, was it a foul? Was it a handball? Yes or no? And I was one of those guys who would just admit when I've done a foul, admit where I've handballed it, give the other team the ball and play on. And over time, incidents would happen in the game and players on both teams would look at me and go, Elliot, what did you see? So this was, again, long before I was a referee, but I seemed to be able to prioritize fairness over my own personal benefit, a quality in a ref that I didn't know was going to come in handy later down the line. And then the third clue, I would say, so I'm an Arsenal fan. I'd go to Arsenal games, again, before I was a referee, and there'd be 60,000 Arsenal fans in the Emirates screaming because they wanted a penalty or a handball or a foul. And I'd be sat in my seat going, I think the referee got that one right, actually. And again, you don't want 60,000 people like me in a stadium because that would make for an awful atmosphere. No one wants that. But it was a clue that, hey, maybe that's a good mentality to have as a referee. I can see beyond my personal bias. And I have a quest for finding the fidelity and getting the right outcome.
So, I mean, I guess in your just kind of your character, in your nature, what was it that was like that initial thing that made you say, you know what, I think I could do this, and this could be something I could actually be pretty good at?
That's a good question, and my answer is almost counterintuitive. I would describe my personality as being very high in agreeableness, the personality trait agreeableness. Now, people that are higher in agreeableness, they tend to be people pleasers. That's me. Avoid conflict and try and keep everyone happy. I like to take my time to deliberate over decisions. That does not predict for a good referee, those personality traits. But when I found myself on the field reffing, it was like there was behind the agreeableness a little bit of disagreeableness hidden on the inside that came out as a referee. Now, disagreeable doesn't mean a horrible person. It just means you're able to be a little bit more blunt, put your own feelings about keeping people happy to one side and say, no, it was a foul, it was a handball, and not be swayed by what people think of you. So I found that personality trait came out of me when I would referee in a way that it didn't come out outside off the field. So there was that. The other thing is that there's a lot of reasons not to referee, and a lot of people, they want to play as long as they can. If they're reffing, that means they're not playing. So as a player, I was the kind of player, I didn't need the ball at my feet the whole time. I wasn't the one that was going to try and dribble around everyone and ask for every pass. I was the kind of player who would be at the back, organizing, talking to my teammates and communicating and encouraging. And if I didn't get much of the ball in a game, I'm okay with that. So as a referee, I was still able to use all those attributes in a very transferable way. I'm quite a verbal communicator as a ref. I think it's an important skill. And so when I'm refereeing, I get all of that out of reffing that I did as a player. So I didn't miss being a player in the same way that maybe someone understandably would.
You kind of mentioned your law background. What were some of the kind of, I don't know, tricks or traits from that career that you use when you are out on the field reffing?
Well, you spend years studying law and applying it to facts. And so when you practice that, your processing speed gets very, very, very quick. When you're a referee, you haven't got really the opportunity to see something in front of you and take 10 seconds to go, okay, well, then there's this, and then there's this. And you have to be able to make quite an instantaneous decision. And so I think being able to have the ingredients of the laws of the game in your head and apply them instantly to the facts it's essential, so that decision making becomes almost automatic. So having a law background doesn't guarantee you're going to be a good ref, but I would say that would be the pervasive skill that helped me out a lot.
So wait, Andrew, we always introduce you as the player's voice, but you are also a referee. You went through a certification process just about a year or so ago. Yeah, and I think you also reffed when you were younger. What was that whole thing? As someone who likes to play, prefers to play, what drew you over to then also reffing?
Yeah, I suppose as the voice of the player, I should provide a little background there as well. I've been playing for as long as I can consciously remember. I played all the way through college as well. So, yeah, I certainly got into soccer as a player, and it's probably my biggest passion. I started officiating. I first was certified when I was 15. That was more out of a desire to make some money as a 15-year-old with a flexible schedule, less so than I was actually interested in refereeing itself. My first year as an official was pretty brutal. I hated it, so I did not get recertified. I didn't get recertified again until I went back to college. Really more or less the same situation. College needed some additional income. I felt like I knew the sport really well, so I thought it'd be something that I could do. That experience was much better. By then, I think the maturing made refereeing much easier. But then after that, obviously, I got involved with Gotham, and my interest in refereeing really grew from just having to hire and schedule and manage referees. I would really say what drew me to it, post college, was really seeing so many of our officials struggle and receive a lot of abuse. It became a situation where I wanted to understand it better. And I also just had to referee, given the nature of the job.
Yep.
And I started to realize that it was something I really liked. I found it really fascinating. And it's been hugely beneficial to both my full-time job, but it's now become something it's much more than that. I really enjoy officiating. If something were to happen and I wasn't working for Gotham tomorrow, I think I would still keep refereeing. So it's something I've really enjoyed learning a lot more about over the last handful of years. I've been certified for most of my adult life. Been a few years I took off that I had to get recertified, but it's something I've been doing now for 16 years. So
Okay, quickly, your favorite and least favorite part about being a referee?
ooh, okay, good one. I really I really love high intensity, high quality matches. I enjoy managing those types of matches. The more talent on the field and the more importance in the game, I feel like it really improves my own level, and I really enjoy that. Enjoy the challenge of trying to keep up with some really great athletes and some great players on the field. So I enjoy that challenge. I think my least favorite part of officiating is certainly dealing with irrational. I would say the youth game is the most frustrating to me. So dealing with irrational parents, coaches, I tend to have a bit more sympathy for, although they are also frustrating. So I think it's just processing that people are wildly irrational and have no idea what they're talking about, and trying to consider that when you're responding to certain things that are being thrown your way. So that's definitely my least favorite part.
Elliot,
Same questions to you.
Favorite thing about being a ref? Well, a couple of things. Firstly, you hear about athletes being in the zone as a player, and that applies just as much for referees. And I think getting yourself in the zone in the middle of a game as a referee is as meaningful and satisfying as anything else. So for a referee, that means a game that's testing you physically. It's testing your player management skills and your ability to control a match. It's testing your reading of the game and how teams are playing, patterns of play. So when you're right on the edge of your ability and contributing to the game in that sense, I think that's a very addictive feeling for a referee. And if you know that feeling as a player, then I'm sure you'll understand that. It's also an amazing community. When we're out on the field, we can be a bit of a lone wolf, especially if it's a one-man crew and not even a three-man crew. But out there, think about how many games are going on where there's a referee. When the game's over, and we have our monthly meetings and we have our gatherings and we get together when we ask each other questions and ask one another for advice. This happened to me on a game. What would you have done, or what have you done when it's been similar? There's a community out there that's very tightly knit. We're very much a third team, and when we get together, it's great. I think my least favorite thing about being a referee is similar to Andrew. It's dealing with people who are how do I say it? Not led by emotion, but where the solution
bias.
Bias is inevitable, but the solution to appeasing them isn't to give them a logical explanation, because if you're coming from an emotional place and you've got a referee saying, oh well, actually this is what happened, ABC, sometimes that's not the way to appease someone. So it can be hard to find that way of meeting someone, engaging with them, appeasing them, and sometimes that's a challenge, because there are people out there that are not going to accept what you say regardless. So you do have to encounter people that you're just not going to win them over. And for an agreeable person, like I said, I can put that to one side to a certain extent, but where I'm refereeing, but I still have a drive to keep people happy. And sometimes when I can't do that, I think, oh man, that's a frustration.
Big controversial thing, guys, that is floated out into the ether is the blue card. This new thing being injected into the game, allegedly, possibly soon, by some of the larger confederations talking about it for really the first time ever. We've heard this kind of concept thrown out, and it obviously plays out a little bit at the rec level. Elliot, let's start with you. Let's break this down. So a blue card, kind of flesh this out for us, the people that are just kind of hearing this, not understanding exactly what that means.
Okay, so by way of background, the aim behind all of this is to try and deter and punish things that we don't want in the game, specifically dissent and cynical fouls. So that's the necessary aim. And then it's how do we achieve that? So currently, dissent, cynical fouls, yellow cards. And the concern is that it's insufficient punishment, that it's not enough of a deterrence and it's not enough of a punishment, and it's still an issue in the game and it hasn't gone away. So it's about finding a rule or a policy or a practice that will achieve the aim to diminish dissent and cynical fouls in a proportional way. So not going over the top, not to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You could come up with a rule that says, right, dissent, red card, 3-match ban, a month's wages, and a 2-point penalty for the team. Well, that for sure would deter dissent, but it would be disproportionate. On the other hand, if you have no rules in force, then it's going to get out of control. So what's being proposed by IFAB is blue cards. It's specifically for dissent and cynical fouls. If a player is guilty, they're shown a blue card, and that will result in a sin bin, a temporary time penalty for that player, where in the case of a 90-minute game, a player would sit out for 10 minutes. The team would play down for that duration, and then the player would be allowed back in. It would allow for mixing and matching of cards, so that yellow plus yellow would equal red, yellow plus blue would equal red for the same player, and blue plus blue would equal red for the same player. So that's the background. IFAB are not just throwing this new rule into the game. What they've done over the last couple of years is introduced it at grassroots in certain places around the world. UK is one of them. So they're using grassroots to test it. They're getting feedback. The next step would be to test it at a slightly higher level of competition, whether that's FA Cup or Women's FA Cup or Women's Champions League. I've heard a few of those competitions mentioned. And then you keep shooting bullets and then wait and see. So that's where we're at right now.
Andrew, let's bring you in on this one. I mean, just kind of your general thoughts on this being implemented. Let's start with the kind of at a lower rec level, implementing something like this. How do you think this would go? What are your thoughts generally on this?
It's something that it already does exist in the recreational soccer. A lot of it's indoors, at least here in America. There's a lot of indoor facilities that use, I think, I don't know if it's always called blue card, but sometimes we call it like an orange card or something.
Yeah,
but,
and the indoor field's already set up like a hockey rink, so might as well go with their rules, right?
Exactly. Yeah, indoor soccer basically is hockey on turf. So it already does exist. I haven't officiated any indoor myself, so I don't want to speculate too much on whether that's been beneficial to indoor or not. But at the rec level, I think I have two thoughts. One is adding more laws is going to be difficult for officials at that level to absorb and implement efficiently and successfully. So part of me is a little skeptical on adding more layers to what they have to process already, especially when you already do have a yellow card, which can essentially do a lot of the same things. My other thought, though, is I think every sport has to evolve or die. You have to continue to progress. Society's not going to stand still just for the sake of a certain sport. A lot of people right now are upset because they don't want anything in soccer to change. They stop tinkering with the game, yada yada. I think that's a really naive approach. I think you have to. It's worth at least trialing. How that affects the lower levels, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much. I think it could be useful, but a little hesitant to add too much more to the plate of some of our officials.
Elliot, I mean, adding something like this at the professional level seems kind of wild. I mean, your take on all of that?
It's a big change for sure. One of the biggest changes that we've had for a long time, and I think Andrew's right. You need to be open to change and ready to evolve, but at the same time, do it in a cautious way and be ready for unintended consequences. So there's been a comparison made with rugby union where sin bins have been around for a while and they are effective. They're effective because they've it's been one of the reasons why they have less of a dissent issue. And also playing a player down in rugby can have a real negative impact. There's a lot more ways to score in rugby, a penalty, a try. And so playing a player down can really affect your team. You want to avoid it. One of the counterpoints made to that is that doesn't equate to football. In football, if you're reduced to 10 men for 10 minutes, you'll adopt negative tactics. You'll kill time. You'll drag out every throw in, every free kick, every goal kick. You'll put men behind the ball knowing that your player is back on in 3 minutes, now 2 minutes, and it could turn the game into a little bit of a negative spectacle. Mm-hmm. So that's a possible unintended consequence of a sin bin. And it's hard to know exactly what that's going to look like until we trial it. So I'm interested to see what the games look like at the grassroots level and at high level of competition as well. There have been a lot of innovations over the years, and look, yellow cards and red cards, they were invented. We didn't have them. And then, so they came about in the 1966 World Cup. There was a game where Bobby Charlton and Jack Charlton, two brothers that, you know, they look similar. This was before yellow and red cards had been invented. It turned out after the game, each of those players had been booked, and the England camp, the coaches, they hadn't known it during the game. It got reported in the newspapers that they'd been booked, and so the problem became obvious. How do we communicate cautions and red cards? So this English referee, Ken Aston, he was sitting in his car in traffic, looking at traffic lights as they changed from red to orange to green, and you know the light bulb went off. So orange was warning and red was see you later, you're off. Now the difference there is, yes, he invented red and yellow cards, but we weren't creating cautions and we weren't creating dismissals. They already existed. The cards were there to just improve the communication of what was already there. Blue cards, it's different. It's a new rule. It will have an impact that's quite hard to predict. And there's been quite a lot of concern among stakeholders in the game, players, ex-players, coaches, ex-coaches, people in the media. They're very concerned about tinkering with something that isn't broken. And I'm just wondering whether there isn't a lesser way of achieving the same end, whether it's at a high level, miking referees up so that communication between the referee and players, it's more transparent, and players have got nowhere to hide if they come out and dissent. That could be a deterrent. And it could be a question of training our referees to a greater extent on how to use the yellow card to consistently and effectively punish dissent. No, it means post-match reporting for them, and they don't want to do it. So either they don't give the yellow card on the game where it's warranted, or they do give the yellow card and then it isn't reported, and then the dissent continues with the referee having to handle that same team next week. So I wonder if the current laws of yellows is maybe there isn't an issue with it. We just need to apply it better, what we've already got.
You mentioned at the grassroots level in England, they're already kind of using a similar kind of sin bin setup. You're reffing at that level right now and doing some of those games. What has been the reaction? What has been kind of the takeaway of how that's been implemented so far?
Mixed. And I mean, I've got a very anecdotal example. So when I just came back to London before Christmas, I went to a local field where there was an adult 11-a-side game going on, and the referee was handing out, it wasn't a blue card, but it was a yellow card with a sin bin. So there were 3 or 4 sin bins in a game, and I struck up a couple of conversations with the players on the touchline and the coaches, asking them for just their experience of how the sin bins have impacted on dissent in the last couple of years. And they said, "Oh, it's made no difference. It's had no impact." Now that's one example. That's just a couple of conversations. I don't know how reliable that data is or how widely reflected that is across the board. But it, their view was that sin bins were not a deterrent. It wasn't stopping people dissenting towards the referee at all. My experience of the kind of recreational leagues that Andrew's talking about, leagues like Gotham and similar, where I've used temporary suspensions for players, and I found that it's effective. It does create another nuance in the game that can lead to more inconsistency. So I guess that's a risk. So yes, it could reduce dissent if done well. It could be another cause of contention. Why did this referee give a player a sin bin and versus this one that didn't? So yeah, it's if done right, it could be effective, but not without its issues in implementing it.
Andrew, you mentioned it a little bit about just kind of at the rec level, adding that on to kind of the plate for referees. For Gotham, is this something you see us adopting at any point, especially if it kind of becomes a more universal IFAB rule? Or is this something that may not be for us?
At Gotham, our approach is to keep things simple. So I think initially this isn't something we're going to jump on and immediately start implementing, because it certainly doesn't keep things simple. However, we do like to mirror most of our laws right off of IFAB. It's easier for referees to follow what they already know. I personally don't believe it benefits us to do a lot of tinkering on our own. If this is something that becomes standard across the sport, I think it's certainly something Gotham would likely follow. So I think the short answer is it's certainly not on our radar to implement right now, but wouldn't rule against it forever. It's something that we could certainly look at as it becomes standardized. If it becomes standardized, I could easily see this not making it past the trial stage. Personally, I think they have kind of the right idea. Dissent is a real problem, which is something we need to point out. Dissent is a massive issue. It's really only appearing to get worse, not better. So all of the pundits and all of the whatever you want to call them on Twitter just screaming at the void about how you can't tinker with the sport, yada yada. This is ridiculous. I don't think they understand that. And there's a lot of comments being like, why would IFAB do this? Like, who told them to do this? Where does this come from? It comes from referees getting fed up with abuse. That's where it comes from. And that's important to point out. So anything that could potentially help with that is something we should consider doing, and IFAB should consider doing. And I don't necessarily think blue cards is the right mechanism, but I think their intention is really good. And that's something everyone seems to be looking past. They're trying to improve the game. They're trying to give referees another tool to improve the game and to the referee shortage across the entire world, let alone the United States. And helping referees helps the game. So it helps everyone. So the intent is good. I like the intent.
If you see something dodgy on a game you're watching on TV, or if something frustrates you in your own local match, send it in to us. We will chop it up and break it down right here on the Whistle Stop.